You're no daughter of mine. Get out and don't come back." Can you imagine your own father saying those words while rain hammers against the windows? Those were the last words James Park spoke to his 18-year-old daughter before he threw her into the midnight storm. Barefoot, in nothing but her school uniform, clutching the academic award her stepmother had just accused her of stealing. 6 hours later, a car would pull up to that bus stop. Not a taxi, but a black SUV with tinted windows. And when James Park learned who stepped out of that vehicle, his hands would shake so violently he'd drop his phone. But by then, Rose was already gone. It would take 7 years for James to understand what he'd thrown away. 7 years for a terrified teenager to become the woman standing beside the most dangerous man in the city. But on that rain-soaked night, she wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about survival. About the stranger in the tailored suit who crouched down in the pouring rain to ask her one question. "Who did this to you?" Park Soo-jin. Some storms don't destroy you. They wash away everything false, so the real you can finally rise. Welcome back to the channel. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves a good drama. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Some storms are not sent to destroy you. They are sent to deliver you into the arms of your destiny. The evening of March 19, 2018 began the way most evenings did in the Park household, with Rose trying to be invisible. She came home from school through the back entrance, the one that led directly to the converted basement room that had become hers after Patricia married her father 3 years ago. Her stepsister Claire had the bedroom that used to be Rose's, the one with the bay window and the built-in bookshelf her mother had painted lavender before she died. Rose set her backpack down on the narrow bed and pulled out the certificate she'd hidden between her textbooks. First place, Regional Academic Excellence Award. Her name engraved in gold letters. She'd won it that morning in front of the entire school district, but she hadn't told anyone at home. She'd learned years ago that her achievements only made things worse. The basement room was always damp, even in spring, but Rose had grown accustomed to the chill that never quite left her bones. She kept her mother's wedding ring on a chain around her neck, tucked beneath her uniform blouse where Patricia couldn't see it and demand she hand it over for safekeeping. She traced the edge of the certificate with one finger. This was supposed to be her proof that she was good enough, smart enough, that she deserved to be here. Tomorrow she would show it to her father. Maybe then he would finally see her again, the way he used to before Patricia's whispers filled his ears with poison. She didn't know that Patricia had already seen the certificate, had already photographed it, had already begun weaving the lie that would shatter everything. The only person Rose wanted to call was her grandmother's son, who lived across the city in the apartment that still smelled like her mother's favorite incense. The woman who still called her Ne Sarung, my love, in a house where Rose's own name felt like an accusation. The evening of March 19, 2018 began the way most evenings did in the Park household, with Rose trying to be invisible. She came home from school through the back entrance, the one that led directly to the converted basement room that had become hers after Patricia married her father 3 years ago. Her stepsister Claire had the bedroom that used to be Rose's, the one with the bay window and the built-in bookshelf her mother had painted lavender before she died. Rose set her backpack down on the narrow bed and pulled out the certificate she'd hidden between her textbooks. First place, Regional Academic Excellence Award. Her name engraved in gold letters. She'd won it that morning in front of the entire school district, but she hadn't told anyone at home. She'd learned years ago that her achievements only made things worse. The basement room was always damp, even in spring, but Rose had grown accustomed to the chill that never quite left her bones. She kept her mother's wedding ring on a chain around her neck, tucked beneath her uniform blouse where Patricia couldn't see it and demand she hand it over for safekeeping. She could hear them upstairs. Patricia's laugh, bright and performative. Claire's voice, petulant about something. And her father, her father, responding with the gentle patience he used to reserve for Rose, back when her mother was alive and he still remembered how to look at his daughter without Patricia's interpretations clouding his vision. Rose remembered the first dinner after Patricia moved in. She'd been 15, still raw from her mother's death only 8 months earlier. Patricia had made her father's favorite meal, kalbi and japchae, And Rose had quietly mentioned that her mother used to add sesame oil to the spinach. Patricia's smile hadn't faltered, but her eyes had gone cold as winter glass. "Well," she'd said lightly, touching James's hand, "I suppose we all have our own ways of doing things. Your father seems to prefer mine." After that, Rose's contributions to any conversation were met with subtle corrections. Her memories of her mother were gently dismissed as confused or dramatic. When Rose tried to show her father her report card, straight A's as always, Patricia would simultaneously produce Claire's B+ average and spend 20 minutes explaining how Claire was flourishing despite her learning differences, how grades weren't everything, how Rose was naturally academic while Claire had emotional intelligence. Within 6 months, Rose was eating dinner in her room. Just to give Claire some space at the table, Patricia had suggested. You know how anxious she gets in crowds. There were 4 people in the house. 4 was not a crowd. Within a year, Rose's bedroom became Claire's bedroom. She needs the natural light for her art, Patricia explained, and James had nodded along, never noticing that Rose's art supplies, the ones her mother had bought her, had been quietly donated to Goodwill the week before. Rose learned to do her laundry at midnight when no one would complain about the noise. She learned to shower at 5 in the morning before Patricia needed the bathroom. She learned that if she wanted toilet paper or shampoo, she needed to buy it herself with money from her weekend job at the library, because the household supplies somehow never made it to the basement. She learned that her father would believe anything Patricia said, especially when it was wrapped in concern. "I'm just worried about Rose. She's so withdrawn. Do you think she's depressed? Maybe we should watch her more carefully." Which meant her bedroom door lock was removed. Her laptop was temporarily borrowed by Claire for a school project and returned with her saved files deleted. Her phone was subject to random checks for her own safety. But Rose kept her head down. She studied by flashlight under her blanket when they cut off her electricity by accident. She wore the same 3 uniforms, washing them in the basement sink when the machines upstairs were too full of Claire's clothes. She saved every penny she earned, because Rose had a plan. She would graduate. She would win scholarships. She would escape this beautiful prison where she was fed just enough to survive but starved of everything that mattered. She traced the certificate one more time, then slid it back into her bag. Tomorrow. She would show her father tomorrow, and maybe, just maybe, he would finally see what she'd become despite them all. Upstairs, Patricia was already making a phone call. Rose was setting the table for breakfast the next morning when she noticed Patricia's diamond bracelet glinting from inside the silverware drawer. Her hand froze mid-reach for a spoon. The bracelet was Patricia's most prized possession, a gift from James on their wedding day. 18-karat white gold with channel-set diamonds that caught light like captured stars. Patricia wore it everywhere. She'd once made Claire cry for touching it with greasy fingers. It didn't belong in the kitchen drawer. It belonged in Patricia's jewelry box upstairs, the one with the combination lock that only she and James knew. Rose's stomach tightened with an instinct she'd learned to trust. Something was wrong. She started to reach for the bracelet to return it upstairs, then stopped. Every horror movie, every true crime documentary, every painful lesson from the last 3 years screamed the same warning. Don't touch it. This is a trap. She pulled her hand back and finished setting the table with the forks and knives from the opposite side of the drawer, leaving the bracelet exactly where it lay. 20 minutes later, Patricia descended the stairs in her silk robe, Claire trailing behind her in matching pink pajamas that cost more than Rose's entire wardrobe. James was already seated, reading the morning news on his tablet, coffee steaming beside him. "Good morning, family," Patricia sang, her voice honey-sweet. She kissed James on the cheek, then turned to survey the table with the critical eye of a general inspecting troops. Her gaze landed on Rose, and something flickered in her expression. Surprise, then recalculation, then something darker. Rose kept her face neutral and returned to the stove where she was scrambling eggs. Patricia moved to the silverware drawer with theatrical casualness, pulling it open to retrieve a serving spoon. Rose heard the sharp intake of breath, the pause that lasted a beat too long. "James," Patricia said, her voice suddenly thin and trembling. "James, it's gone." "What's gone?" Her father didn't look up from his tablet. My bracelet. The one you gave me on our wedding day. Patricia's hand fluttered to her throat. I had it right here. I took it off while I was baking yesterday because I didn't want to get flour on it. I put it in this drawer for just a moment and oh God, I must have forgotten to take it back upstairs. Rose's blood ran cold. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. Patricia hadn't been baking yesterday. Claire had ordered Thai food for dinner while Rose was at work. James finally looked up, his brow furrowed. It's probably just misplaced. Check your jewelry box. I already did. Patricia's voice cracked convincingly. Before I came downstairs. When I woke up and realized I'd left it down here, I went to check if I'd somehow put it away without remembering, but it's not there. James, someone took it. The air in the kitchen changed. Claire had gone very still, her eyes wide and fixed on Rose with an expression that looked almost like pity, or maybe anticipation. Nobody took anything, James said firmly, but Rose could hear the edge creeping into his voice. The prosecutor's tone. It has to be somewhere. Rose was down here alone all evening. Patricia's words dropped like stones into still water. After she came home from school. I heard her in the kitchen. Rose turned from the stove, eggs forgotten. I didn't take anything. I just came home and went to my room. I didn't even come upstairs. You're saying I'm lying? Patricia's eyes glistened with tears that appeared on command. James, why would I lie about this? That bracelet means everything to me. It was your mother's before you gave it to me. That was news to Rose. Her grandmother had never mentioned giving James a diamond bracelet, but she watched her father's face harden, watched him swallow the bait whole. Rose, he said quietly, dangerously, empty your backpack. And your pockets. Dad, I didn't. Now. Rose's hands shook as she retrieved her backpack from where she'd left it by the basement door. She unzipped it slowly, pulling out textbooks, folders, her pencil case. And then, wedged between her English binder and her history textbook, something glinted. Patricia's bracelet tumbled onto the kitchen table. The room erupted. Rose didn't remember most of the walk. She remembered her father's face, red and contorted with a rage she'd never seen before. She remembered his hand on her shoulder, propelling her toward the door. She remembered trying to explain, her voice breaking over words that dissolved into nothing against the wall of his certainty. She remembered Claire crying, actual tears, not the practiced kind, saying, "Daddy, maybe we should just call the police instead," which only made everything worse. She remembered Patricia's hand on James's arm, gentle and restraining, saying, "Let her go, darling. Just let her go before you do something you regret." As if throwing his daughter into a storm wasn't already something to regret. She remembered the door slamming, the lock clicking, the sound of her own fist pounding against wood that wouldn't open, and then the rain already falling in sheets, soaking through her white school blouse within seconds. She'd run at first, barefoot on pavement that was slick and cold and littered with things that cut her feet. She didn't know where she was running to, only that she had to get away from that house, from her father's voice still echoing in her skull. "You're no daughter of mine." The bus stop appeared like a mirage through the rain, a glass shelter glowing under a single streetlight. Rose stumbled inside and collapsed onto the wooden bench, her entire body shaking so violently she couldn't tell if it was from cold or shock or both. The rain hammered against the glass roof in a deafening rhythm. Water streamed down the transparent walls, distorting the empty street beyond into abstract shapes of darkness and reflected light. Rose hugged her knees to her chest, trying to conserve what little warmth remained in her body, but her soaked uniform clung to her skin like ice. Her feet were bleeding. She could see dark smears on the concrete floor of the shelter, rain washing them away almost as quickly as they appeared. One of her toes might be broken. She'd kicked something metal in her blind flight, but the pain felt distant, belonging to someone else's body. She had $17 in her skirt pocket. No phone, that was somewhere in the house, probably in Patricia's hands by now, being searched for evidence. No coat. No shoes. No keys to anywhere. Her backpack with her wallet, her ID, her acceptance letter to Boston University. All of it was still on the kitchen table where her father had dumped it out, searching for more stolen things that didn't exist. The academic excellence certificate was probably in the trash by now. Or maybe Patricia had burned it. Maybe that had been the plan all along. Rose pressed her forehead against her knees and tried to think through the fog in her brain. Her grandmother lived 9 miles away, but Rose didn't know the address by heart, only how to get there by car. The library where she worked wouldn't open until 9 in the morning, 6 hours from now. She had friends, or people she sat with at lunch, but she didn't know any of their addresses either, didn't know them well enough to show up on their doorstep at midnight, soaking wet and accused of theft. A bus would come eventually. The sign said the last Route 47 ran at 2 a.m. She could ride it somewhere. Anywhere. She had $17. Maybe that would be enough for a motel room, though she doubted any place would rent to an 18-year-old girl with no ID, no luggage, and no shoes. Maybe she could just stay on the bus, ride it to the end of the line and back over and over until morning. Until she could think clearly enough to make a plan. The cold was settling deeper now, into her bones, into her lungs. Each breath felt like swallowing shards of glass. Her lips were numb. Her fingers had gone from painful to worryingly without sensation. She knew, distantly, that this was dangerous. That hypothermia was a real thing that happened to people who sat in wet clothes in March storms. But she couldn't make herself move. Couldn't make herself care. She closed her eyes and listened to the rain, and wondered if her mother was watching from somewhere, and if she was disappointed in how easily Rose's life had fallen apart. Headlights cut through the darkness. Rose didn't open her eyes. Just another car passing through the night, another stranger with somewhere warm to go. The engine stopped. The car door opened with a heavy, expensive sound that cut through the rain. Rose kept her eyes closed, kept her forehead pressed against her knees. If she didn't acknowledge whoever it was, maybe they'd leave her alone. Maybe they'd decide she was drunk or high or just another problem not worth engaging with. Footsteps. Steady, unhurried, deliberate. Dress shoes on wet pavement. They stopped just outside the shelter. "Hey." A man's voice, deep and accented. Korean like her father, but sharper somehow. Colder. "Look at me." Rose didn't move. She was so tired. Tired of being looked at, judged, found wanting. "I said, look at me." The voice was closer now, and there was something in it that made her hindbrain scream danger in a way that finally cut through the numbness. Rose lifted her head slowly. A man stood just inside the shelter, rain streaming off the shoulders of his long black coat. He was tall, powerfully built, maybe in his early 30s. His white shirt was open at the collar despite the cold, and even in the dim streetlight, Rose could see the dark edges of tattoos crawling up his neck. His dark hair was slicked back from his face, rain dripping from the sharp angles of his jaw. He was staring at her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. Black and furious and somehow wounded. "How old are you?" he demanded. 18. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. 18, he repeated, and something dangerous flickered across his face. "Where are your shoes?" Rose looked down at her bloody feet as if noticing them for the first time. I don't know." The man moved closer, and Rose instinctively pressed herself back against the bench. He stopped, his jaw clenching. "I'm not going to hurt you. But you need to tell me what happened. Right now." "Nothing happened. I'm fine." "You're sitting barefoot in a storm looking like—" He cut himself off, his hand curling into a fist. "Don't lie to me. Who did this to you?" The question cracked something in Rose's chest. The tears she'd been holding back since her father shoved her out the door suddenly spilled over, mixing with the rain on her face. "Nobody. It was my fault. I took something that wasn't mine. My father. He was right to." "Stop." The word was a command, sharp enough to silence her mid-sentence. The man crouched down in front of her, and Rose could see his face clearly now. Handsome in a harsh way, with a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow. A gold watch gleamed on his wrist, expensive enough to pay rent for a year. "Say that again." "The part about your father. He threw me out because I stole." "Did you?" No. But he thinks. Then why are you sitting here? The man's voice rose, echoing off the glass walls. Why are you sitting in the rain making excuses for someone who threw you away like garbage? Why aren't you fighting back? Rose stared at him. This stranger who was suddenly angry on her behalf in a way no one had been in 3 years. Fighting back how? He's my father. I have nothing. No money, no phone, nowhere to go. What am I supposed to? So you're just going to sit here and freeze? He stood abruptly, pacing the small shelter like a caged animal. You're going to let them win? Let them throw you out and forget you existed. What else can I do? Rose's voice broke. I'm nobody. I have nothing. The man stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression shifting into something colder, more calculating. You have something. You have the fact that you're still breathing. That you survived whatever hell you just walked out of. He pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his face in harsh blue light. I'm going to make a call. And then you're going to make a choice. What choice? He looked at her with those burning black eyes. Whether you want to stay a victim, or whether you want to learn how to make people regret underestimating you. Rose's heart hammered against her ribs. Who are you? Park Soo-jin. He said it like she should know the name. Like it should mean something. It didn't. Not yet. Come with me, he said, extending his hand. Behind him, the black SUV waited with its door open, rain pouring onto leather seats that probably cost more than her father's car. Rose looked at his hand. At the shelter. At the empty street beyond. She took his hand. The SUV smelled like leather and expensive cologne and something else Rose couldn't identify. Power, maybe, or danger. Park Soo-jin drove in silence, his jaw tight, his hands steady on the wheel. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, familiar streets becoming unfamiliar as they moved away from everything Rose had ever known. She should have been afraid. Every instinct should have been screaming at her that getting into a stranger's car, a stranger with tattoos crawling up his neck and a name he said like a threat, was the worst decision she could make. But fear required energy, and Rose had none left. She sat shivering in the passenger seat, wrapped in the suit jacket he'd thrown at her without a word, and watched the rain streak across the windshield. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city proper and climbing into the hills where houses became estates, where walls and gates replaced chain-link fences. Park Soo-jin pulled through a set of iron gates that opened automatically, up a long driveway lined with cherry trees that would probably be beautiful in any season except this one. The house, no, the estate, loomed ahead, all clean lines and dark wood and windows that reflected nothing back. Modern and cold and utterly without warmth. He parked in front of the main entrance and killed the engine. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Why did you stop? Rose finally asked. At the bus stop. Why did you stop for me? Park Soo-jin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been, but no less intense. Because I know what you looked like sitting there. He turned to face her, and something raw flickered across his features. I've seen that look before. In a mirror. 15 years ago. Rose waited, sensing that interrupting would shatter whatever moment this was. My father was a businessman, Park Soo-jin continued, staring straight ahead now. Legitimate, respected, everything by the book. I was his oldest son. His heir. Until I wasn't. His jaw clenched. I made choices he didn't approve of. Friends he thought were beneath our family. I questioned things I wasn't supposed to question. And one day he gave me an ultimatum. His way or the door. You chose the door. I chose the door. A bitter smile crossed his face. I was 19. He threw me out with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and told me I was dead to him. That if I ever used the park name again, he'd make sure I regretted it. Rose pulled the jacket tighter around herself. What did you do? I survived. The words were hard, sharp-edged. The friends my father hated? They became my family. The choices he despised? They made me who I am now. He finally looked at her again. I built an empire from nothing. And when my father's legitimate business started failing 5 years later, when he came crawling back asking for money, I had the distinct pleasure of closing the door in his face. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. "Why are you telling me this?" Rose whispered. "Because I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to understand exactly what it means." Park Soo-jin shifted in his seat to face her fully. "You can walk away right now. I'll give you money for a hotel, a phone, whatever you need to find your grandmother or whoever will take you in. You can go back to being the girl who got thrown away and spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been. Or you stay. You let me teach you how to survive in a world that doesn't care about your innocence or your good grades or how badly you've been hurt." His eyes were black fire. "I'll give you an education your father never could. I'll give you protection, resources, connections. I'll teach you how to be dangerous." In exchange for what? Loyalty. Your complete discretion about everything you see and hear in this house. And eventually, when you're ready, your skills. He leaned forward slightly. "I don't do charity, Rose. This is an investment. You'll work for me. Not now you'll study, train, heal. But someday." Rose's mind spun. This man was offering her everything and asking for her soul in return. She should say no. Should take the money and run. Should find her grandmother and try to rebuild something normal. But normal had thrown her into a storm. Normal had chosen lies over truth. "What kind of work?" she asked. Park Soo-jin smiled, and it was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator's potential. The kind that makes powerful people very uncomfortable. Rose thought about her father's face. About Patricia's calculated tears. About 3 years of swallowing injustice and calling it peace. When do I start? If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Rose fought through hell to claim her power. The least you can do is click a button to see what happens next. This story is just beginning, and trust me, the shadows hiding secrets, the empire Rose is building, the mysterious figure who's been watching, it all leads somewhere you won't see coming. Hit like if this story grabbed you. Share this with someone who needs to see what real strength looks like. And subscribe with notifications on, because when the next chapter drops, you're going to want to be first in line. Some storms don't destroy you. They wash away everything false so the real you can finally rise. Don't get left behind. The first year, Rose learned how to be invisible in a different way. Not the cowering invisibility of her father's house, but the deliberate, predatory kind. Park Soo-jin's estate became her training ground, and his people, the ones who appeared without warning and disappeared just as quickly, became her teachers. A woman named Min taught her how to walk into a room and read every exit, every threat, every alliance within 30 seconds. A man called simply Doctor tended to her feet and taught her basic emergency medicine while explaining that powerful people always needed someone who could stitch wounds and keep secrets. An elderly man with scars on his knuckles taught her taekwondo in the estate's private gym at 5 every morning, never speaking except to correct her form. Park Soo-jin himself taught her the most important lessons. He sat across from her in his study night after night, teaching her to play chess and explaining that every piece on the board was someone's daughter, someone's father, someone who thought they were too important to be sacrificed. Power, he said, moving his queen to trap her king, isn't about who has the most. It's about who's willing to use what they have without hesitation. She enrolled in online university courses under a name that wasn't quite hers, Rose Park instead of Rose Park, studying business and computer science and criminal psychology. Park Soo-jin paid for everything and asked only that she maintain perfect grades. "If you're going to work for me," he said, "you'll need to be the smartest person in every room. Not just smart enough. The smartest." The second year, Rose learned about Park Soo-jin's world. She sat silent in the corner during meetings where men in expensive suits discussed shipments and territories and problems that needed handling. She learned that her benefactor ran an empire built on things that lived in legal gray areas, import-export businesses that moved luxury goods through channels customs rarely questioned, real estate acquisitions that happened just before neighborhoods became valuable, information brokerage that made lawyers and politicians very wealthy and very quiet. He was a criminal, technically, But he was the kind of criminal that other criminals feared and legitimate businessmen needed. The kind who never got his hands dirty but always knew where the bodies were buried. Park Soo-jin never touched her. Never looked at her as anything other than the investment he'd called her that first night. He was cruel in his teaching, impatient with weakness, dismissive of excuses. But he was also protective in a way that confused her, appearing suddenly when one of his associates looked at her too long, ending business relationships with men who suggested Rose could be useful in other ways, ensuring she had everything she needed without ever asking if she was happy. She wasn't sure he knew what happiness was. The third year, Rose started working. Small things at first, delivering packages, sitting in on meetings to take notes, researching business rivals and finding their weaknesses. She was good at it. Better than good. She had spent years studying people who wanted to destroy her. Now she used those skills to protect the man who'd saved her. She cut her hair short and sharp, started wearing clothes that cost more than her father's monthly mortgage, learned to smile in a way that didn't reach her eyes, to shake hands with men who ran empires built on vice, to drink whiskey without flinching and lie without hesitation. Park Soo-jin watched her transformation with something that might have been pride. "You're not the girl from the bus stop anymore," he said one evening, watching her handle a particularly difficult negotiation with a supplier who thought he could intimidate her. "No," Rose agreed. She was 21 now, and when she looked in a mirror, she barely recognized the terrified teenager she'd been. "I'm not." But sometimes, late at night in her room, a real room now with windows and heat and a door that locked from the inside, she took out the academic excellence certificate she'd salvaged from the trash during one secret visit to her old neighborhood. The paper was torn and stained, but her name was still visible in gold letters. She kept it as a reminder, not of who she'd been, but of what they'd tried to take from her. The fourth year, Park Soo-jin gave her a gun and taught her how to use it. "I hope you never need this," he said, watching her hit the center target at the private range. "But hope is not a strategy." Rose loaded another clip and fired. Every bullet hit exactly where she aimed. The report landed on Rose's desk on a Tuesday morning in late February, 7 years after the night in the storm. She was 25 now, sitting in her office on the third floor of Park Soo-jin's headquarters, a sleek building downtown that officially housed an import-export consulting firm and unofficially served as the nerve center of his empire. She'd been reviewing shipping manifests when Min dropped the manila folder in front of her without ceremony. "Thought you'd want to see this," the older woman said, her expression unreadable. "It came up in our quarterly business intelligence sweep." Rose opened the folder and felt her world tilt sideways. James Park's architectural firm was hemorrhaging money. The numbers were stark, brutal. 3 major clients lost in the past 18 months. 2 ongoing lawsuits from contractors claiming non-payment, a commercial loan default notice from the bank. The company her father had spent 30 years building was circling the drain, and from the projections, it had maybe 6 months before bankruptcy. There were photos too. Recent ones. Her father looked older than 7 years should have made him. His hair almost entirely gray, his face drawn and tired. Patricia still looked immaculate in her designer clothes, but there was something brittle in her smile in the society page photo. And Claire was pregnant, very pregnant, with a caption identifying her fiancé as the son of a family whose business had connections to several of Park Soo-jin's rivals. Rose stared at the images until they blurred. "There's more," Min said quietly. "Page 7. Rose flipped through the financial documents until she found it, a private investigator's report. Her father had hired someone 6 months ago to search for her. The PI's notes were clinical. No current address on file. No credit cards or bank accounts under Rose Park or Rose Monroe. No social media presence. No employment records with tax ID. Subject appears to have disappeared completely after March 2018. The investigation had been closed after 3 months. Insufficient leads to continue. Her father had looked for her. Not immediately. Not that first week or month or even year. But eventually he'd looked. Rose didn't know what to do with that information, where to file it in the careful architecture of rage and indifference she'd built. "Why now?" Rose asked, keeping her voice level. "Why did he start looking?" Min pulled out another document. "This is from our source at the county clerk's office. Patricia filed for a legal separation 4 months ago. She's claiming financial misconduct and seeking to protect her assets from his business debts. Of course. The ship was sinking, and Patricia was scrambling for the lifeboats. Rose wondered if Claire knew her mother was preparing to abandon her father, or if that would be another knife in the dark when the timing was right. There's one more thing. Min's voice was careful now. Patricia's been making inquiries. Quiet ones through her lawyer. She's trying to locate you. Rose's head snapped up. Why? Best guess. She needs a new story. Maybe you didn't steal that bracelet after all. Maybe she remembers things differently now. Maybe she wants to bring you home, let you reconcile with your father before. Min shrugged. Before whatever she has planned next. Rose understood immediately. Patricia needed a villain for the next act of her drama, or maybe a sympathetic prop to soften James's fall. The prodigal daughter returns just in time to watch her father lose everything, perhaps even to shoulder some blame for destabilizing him all those years ago. A new narrative where Patricia was the reasonable one who tried to find the poor lost girl. She won't find me, Rose said flatly. The name I use now, the identity. She won't find you through normal channels, Min agreed. But she's trying. And she's getting desperate. Rose closed the folder and sat back in her chair. Through the window, the city sprawled below her, all glass and steel and possibility. She'd built a life here. A dangerous life, maybe an immoral one by some standards, but it was hers. She was Park Soo-jin's right hand now, the woman who made problems disappear and deals materialize. She was respected, feared, protected. She was nobody's victim. Does he know? Rose asked. Meaning Park Soo-jin. I sent him the report first. He told me to give it to you and let you decide what you want to do about it. Rose traced the edge of the folder with one finger. 7 years ago, she would have been overjoyed to know her father was looking for her. 7 years ago, she would have run back to him, forgiven everything, desperate for even a scrap of his love. But that girl had died in a storm. And Rose wasn't interested in resurrection. Set up a meeting, Rose said quietly. I think it's time my family and I had a conversation. The charity gala was held at the Grandview Hotel, the same venue where Patricia had celebrated her wedding to James Park 7 years ago. Rose remembered because she'd been allowed to attend that reception for exactly 40 minutes before Patricia suggested she looked tired and should go home early with the housekeeper. She'd been 15 and stupid enough to believe it was kindness. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and careful wealth. Rose walked in wearing a black dress that had cost more than her father's monthly car payment. Her hair swept up to reveal diamond earrings that caught light like warnings. Park Soo-jin walked beside her, devastating in a tailored suit, his tattooed hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a gesture of possession that made several heads turn. They made a striking pair. Dangerous. Everyone in the room could sense it, the way prey senses predators. Rose spotted her father within minutes. He was standing near the bar alone, his suit slightly too large on his frame. He'd lost weight. He looked diminished, somehow as if life had been slowly erasing him. Patricia was across the room, laughing too loudly with a group of women who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Claire stood near the dessert table, one hand on her swollen belly, looking miserable. Rose felt Park Soo-jin's hand press slightly against her back. A question. She nodded once, and they moved forward. James saw her when she was 10 feet away. She watched the recognition move across his face in stages. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and then something that might have been joy if it hadn't been laced with so much pain. Rose. His voice cracked on her name. Rose, is that? Hello, Father. Her voice was steady, cold as March rain. She'd practiced this moment in her head 1,000 times, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of seeing him break in real time. Oh my God. Oh my God, he moved toward her, hands reaching, and Park Soo-jin shifted slightly, a subtle repositioning that stopped James mid-step. Her father's eyes flicked to the man beside her, taking in the expensive suit, the tattoos visible at his collar, the absolute stillness of someone who'd learned to be dangerous. Who is this? Park Soo-jin, Rose said, watching her father's face go pale. So he knew the name now. Good. My employer. My partner. The man who found me bleeding and barefoot in a storm 7 years ago because you threw me away like garbage. Rose, please, James's voice broke. I looked for you. I hired investigators. When I realized what Patricia had done, when I found out she'd planted. When? Rose's voice cut like a blade. When did you realize? A week later? A month? A year? She stepped closer, and her father flinched. I was 18 years old, and you chose to believe I was a thief rather than consider for 1 second that your wife might be lying. You didn't even ask me. You just threw me out and locked the door. I know, and I'm so. Where's your bracelet, Patricia? Rose called across the ballroom, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Patricia froze, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. The one I supposedly stole? The one that was supposedly your mother-in-law's priceless heirloom? Patricia's face went white, then red. Rose, what a surprise to see you. Is it? Rose smiled, and it was her cruelest smile, the one she'd learned from watching Park Soo-jin destroy business rivals. You've been looking for me for months. Here I am. She watched Patricia calculate, watched her stepmother's eyes dart between Rose and Park Soo-jin and the crowd of society witnesses now watching with undisguised fascination. I think, Patricia said carefully, we should discuss this privately. No. Rose's voice was iron. We're going to discuss this right here, right now, in front of everyone who watched you destroy me. She turned back to her father, and her composure finally cracked. You want to know what happened to me that night? I sat in a bus shelter for 4 hours, hypothermic and bleeding, with $17 and nowhere to go. I thought about walking into traffic. I thought about just lying down in the rain and letting it end. Tears were streaming down James's face now. Rose, please. He saved me. Rose gestured to Park Soo-jin, who stood silent and lethal beside her. This man, who you probably think is a criminal, who you'd probably rather see me dead than associated with. He gave me everything you took away. Education, protection, purpose. He taught me that I was worth more than your conditional love. I'm sorry. James's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Patricia confessed everything 2 years ago. I filed for divorce. I've been looking for you ever since. Please, Rose. Please let me. Let you what? Apologize. Explain. Rose felt something hot and broken rising in her chest. You had 7 years to find me, and you gave up after 3 months. You had 18 years to choose me over her, and you chose wrong every single time. She looked at him, this man who'd given her life and then tried to take it back, and felt nothing but exhausted grief. I didn't come here for reconciliation, Rose said quietly. I came here to let you see what you lost, and to let you know that I don't need you anymore. I survived you. Park Soo-jin's hand found hers, his grip steady and warm. They walked out into the rain together, leaving her father crying in the ballroom, surrounded by witnesses to his greatest failure. Rose didn't look back. Wait, subscribe first. Tell me your country. Now watch closely, the scariest part is coming up. The rain had started again by the time they reached the SUV, the same vehicle that had stopped at a bus stop 7 years ago for a girl who had nothing. Park Soo-jin opened the passenger door for her, a gesture he never made for anyone else, and Rose slid inside, her heart still hammering from the confrontation. He drove in silence through streets slick with rain, the city lights blurring past like memories trying to fade. Rose watched the water stream down the window and felt something inside her finally break loose, not shattering but unclenching. A fist she'd been holding closed for 7 years finally opening. You didn't have to come with me tonight, she said quietly. I could have faced them alone. Park Soo-jin's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. I know you could have. But you shouldn't have had to. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the dashboard light. Besides, I wanted them to see exactly who has your loyalty now. Rose studied his profile, the sharp jaw, the scar through his eyebrow, the tattoos that marked him as someone who'd chosen his own path and burned every bridge behind him. 7 years ago, she'd taken his hand in desperation. But sometime between then and now, something had shifted. He wasn't just her savior anymore, her employer, her teacher. He was the only person who'd ever chosen her without conditions. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For that night. For all of it." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "You don't owe me gratitude, Rose. You earned everything you have. I just gave you the tools." He paused. "What you did with them, that was all you." They drove past the old neighborhood, past the house where Rose had lived in a basement and learned to make herself small. The lights were on inside. She could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Her father, probably, returned from the gala. Returned to face Patricia and the ruins of everything he'd built on lies. Rose felt nothing looking at it. Not anger, not grief, not even satisfaction. Just the cold recognition that some buildings burned down long before anyone noticed the smoke. "Where are we going?" she asked as Park Soo-jin turned away from the route to the estate. "Somewhere I want to show you." His voice held something she couldn't quite identify. "Something I've been working on." They drove for another 20 minutes, climbing higher into the hills until they reached a property Rose had never seen before. Iron gates opened to reveal a sprawling estate that made Park Soo-jin's current home look modest. Modern architecture met traditional Korean design elements. All clean lines and dark wood and windows that would let in morning light like a benediction. Park Soo-jin parked in front of the main entrance and turned to face her. "I bought this 3 years ago. Had it built to specifications. It's been finished for 6 months." Rose stared at the house, confusion mixing with something else. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because it's yours." He said it simply, as if he were discussing a business transaction. "Well, ours. If you want it to be." Rose's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Park Soo-jin reached out, his tattooed hand cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about him. "I'm saying that 7 years ago, I offered you an investment. A business arrangement. But somewhere along the way, you became something I never planned for." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "You became everything." Rose felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Soo-jin." "You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. Wanted you to see what I've been building for us. A place that's ours, not just mine. A place where—" He stopped, his eyes focusing on something behind her. His expression shifting instantly to that cold, dangerous stillness she recognized. Rose turned to follow his gaze. Across the street, partially hidden in the shadow of a massive oak tree, a figure stood motionless in the rain. Too far away to make out features, but close enough to be watching. Intentionally visible. A message, not a mistake. The figure didn't move, didn't approach. Just stood there, a silhouette against the darkness, observing them with impatience that felt anything but benign. Park Soo-jin's hand moved to the inside of his jacket where Rose knew he kept his gun. "Get down," he said quietly, his voice lethal calm. "Now." But before Rose could move, before Park Soo-jin could react further, the figure lifted one hand in a slow, deliberate wave, and then vanished into the darkness as if they'd never been there at all. The rain fell harder, erasing any trace of footprints, any evidence that someone had been watching at all. Park Soo-jin's jaw clenched. "We need to go. Now." As they drove away from the estate, from their future that suddenly felt less certain, Rose looked back through the rear window. The shadows beneath the oak tree remained empty, but she couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had been watching was still there. Still waiting. Still watching. And whatever they wanted, it was only just beginning. So what do you think happens next? Who was that figure in the shadows? What do they want with Rose and Park Soo-jin? Drop your theories in the comments below. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because the next chapter is going to flip everything upside down. Don't miss it.